Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today our guest is Chris Riley, a noted campaign consultant and bon vivant and many, many things. Chris, thanks for being on Democratic Television.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
The reason why I think we're going to have an interesting discussion is that you do something to help empower people. You're a campaign consultant, amongst other things. And so during the course of our discussion, I'd like to learn a little bit about what do people need to think about if they want to run for office? What does it take? Maybe hear some stories that experiences that you've had, good, bad, and indifferent. Okay. Let's skip the indifferent. This is Democratic Television. So before we start, let's learn a little bit about you. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What were your influences as a kid?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, in the Detroit area. I was born in Detroit, and then we moved out to the suburbs. And so in ways of influences, actually quite a few. Grew up in the late 60s and early 70s. So my dad was definitely an influence because my dad was very much somebody who was very interested in politics. Oh. But we, as a family, we sat down and we watched the Watergate hearings. Oh. And so, because my parents thought it was very important that we understand what was going on. Oh. But my largest influences were really during the women's movement. So Gloria Steinem, Eleanor Smale. Anybody that was, doing anything along the lines and ways of the women's movement were huge influences. I did a lot of studying in ways of Susan B. Anthony. And my sister's birthday was on the 4th of July. So since I, couldn't stand that, I found out that my birthday is actually the day of the signing of the Constitution in 1787. Oh. So I've always been very interested in politics from an early age.
Oh. Did you have any teachers specifically that said, Chris, I see a future for you, it's going to be in politics?
No, I never really had anybody who necessarily had said that. I was, growing up, I was more interested in social work and helping people be able to better understand themselves and be able to get through difficult situations and, really kind of helping people out. So.
Does that mean you've had training? You're a social worker by profession or some other interesting background?
I've never actually held an actual job as a social worker. I went through school and had some internships and starting work along those lines, but never ended up following through in ways of social work.
Did you have other interesting jobs? Were you a bond salesperson on Wall Street and thought, this ain't working?
No, nothing like that. I did have jobs in ways of being a secretary and knew I didn't want to be a secretary. So I knew that very clear. I did for a time, I had lived in New Jersey for a couple of years and worked at a clinic. And so I was technically kind of a counselor for women before they had abortions and helped women through that procedure during that time and then afterwards. So.
Well, so you've been thinking about things quite a bit for a long time, especially with those mythic role models that you were aware of at an early age.
Most definitely, yeah, for a long time.
So you are a campaign consultant now. That's one of the things you do. What opened doors to get you involved in that?
Well, the beginning of all of that was really back in 2002. Being in Michigan, Jennifer Granholm was the Attorney General at the time and had a campaign running for governor. And so I jumped on board on her campaign. Granholm is very charismatic and just brilliant and really wanted to see her be the first woman governor of Michigan. And during that time, I also jumped on board of a campaign of a woman who was running for state senate. And then from there, I just absolutely loved it. Did as much work as I could.
But when you say you got on board, how did you? What levels were you? The campaign manager, the fundraiser. I mean, there's so many things to do in a large campaign like that.
Yeah, no, I just started volunteering in ways of knocking on doors and making phone calls for the candidates.
So kind of a grassroots approach.
Full grassroots, yeah. And then from there, talked to people who had the higher positions, who were the field directors, campaign managers, found out what they did and knew I wanted to do what they did.
You thought, I can do that.
Yeah.
Have all the campaigns you've been involved with been winning campaigns?
No, not all the campaigns. The woman who was running for state senate in Michigan was not a winning campaign. The majority of campaigns, winning campaigns, but not all campaigns. And actually, the ones that don't win, I find that I have learned more off of those campaigns than the ones that have won.
One thing about being in campaigns that I've observed is the people, the professional staff that come in, and a number of the volunteers work so hard. You put in 24 hours a day from the time you sign up till a couple of days after the election. So we'll talk about what you do during those 24/7s, but what do you do to survive those 24/7s?
Yeah, in order for me to survive during that time, I took up yoga really about 3 years ago. And I now practice yoga daily. During the '06 campaign, when my boss, who was a state rep, was running for re-election, I realized I needed to practice yoga daily so that I would not hurt other people that were on the campaign and keep my sense of sanity and still be able to work the full 24/7.
So it's actually fairly accurate to say it is 24/7.
Close to. Enough time to sleep, to go home, spend a little bit of time with my dog and my cat, and then get right back into the office and into the field and talk to voters.
Hopefully renew your driver's license and other things like that.
Yeah.
Check on your 401k.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't want to do that too much. That's where yoga comes in.
Exactly, especially in these days.
Yeah. Have you had people approach you to say, Chris, I think I can make a difference and I want to get involved? And if so, what would you say to someone who's mad as hell and doesn't want to take it anymore, sort of the classic, I want to make a difference?
Yeah, what I would say to those people, and I've had many people over time coming through in ways of interns or volunteers, and the main thing is to find a campaign, a candidate or an issue that you're passionate about, find out about it, and just get onto that and start volunteering. And I tell this to all my interns, find out what everybody does. Get really involved into it. If you're somebody who wants to run for office, I say find out, is it better to run for a more local office, or do you want to look for a statewide office? And what is it that is really driving? Why? What is the passion and why are you mad? And then be able to start writing some of those things down, and then that helps to be able to figure out where the direction will be able to go. If that's to be able to help out with another campaign, or if you want to actually run for yourself.
But for the people who suddenly say, I want to get involved, I think this looks like an interesting world. People that saw the Obama campaign and said, that's pretty cool stuff and that's smart. You say just go down there and go in and start talking.
Yeah, I say go to the local Democratic office, Google the person if you know there's a candidate that you want to get on board, find out where their office is, find the phone number, contact them, and just show up and be willing to do anything. I mean, that's really how I first got involved. There are many people who go to school for political science, start out young that way. I did not do that. I just knew that I wanted to get involved and just showed up every day and said, what do you need me to do? And I'll do whatever you have.
Now, when you first got involved, did you have another job, something that you did, quote, 8 hours a day, and you did this stuff the other 16, or?
Yeah, I was a secretary at a CPA firm in Michigan. That was when I found out that Jennifer Granholm was running, and then Colleen Levitt, who was the state Senate candidate. Her dad actually knocked on my door. And her dad was a Republican and she was a Democrat, and he said, my daughter's running for these reasons. And I said, well, I want to get involved. And so I was willing to stuff envelopes, but also it always seems to me that everybody wants to do the stuffing of envelopes, but I was also willing to knock on doors and talk to people about the candidate and do the things that are a little bit harder that not necessarily everybody always wants to do.
Well, stuffing envelopes implies not willing or ready to have contact with strangers.
Exactly.
And yet there isn't necessarily all that much of that to do. At some point, you run out of envelopes. And did you have problems when you first encountered, potential voters?
Most definitely. What the Grant Home campaign actually had, the way they did it with me was they first gave me just literature just to go to a neighborhood and to just drop literature at these doors. And so I just went out and I did that.
So that means putting a leaflet by everybody's front door?
Exactly.
No knocking?
No knocking, no talking to anybody. So once I did that and I got comfortable with that, and then every now and then somebody might be out, and then I started learning more about my candidate. So I started becoming more comfortable with the talking points about my candidate. And then I realized I could actually knock on a door and talk to somebody and tell them why they would want to vote for my candidate.
Was that scary, or did just something that you got comfortable with after 3 or 4 knocks on doors?
After about the third or fourth, and what somebody did for me is, and this is what I usually do for other people too, is they actually, when I went with them, so I shadowed. So they actually went and knocked on the door, talked to the voter, talked to the person, and then just kind of introduced me. And then so I got to see a few times, and then I got to try it on my own. And so I got to see that it wasn't as scary as I thought that it could be.
So people ought to say, this is the kind of volunteer experience I would like if your campaign can accommodate that.
Exactly, yeah.
And that way you get out there, you know what you're getting into and everything, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm going to want to talk to you during the second half about what kinds of things you think about when you want to run for office, which is a little deeper than just saying, I want to help someone else run for office. So we're going to take a break and be right back with Chris Riley.
Hi, I'm Councilmember Pierluigi Oliverio from the City of San Jose, and I'm asking you today to be involved with the Democratic Party. We have an opportunity here to put new priorities in this country, the state, etc. Whether it's about health care, whether it's about environment, whether it's about independence from foreign oil, about producing an economy that's great for everyone. And that starts with you. Being involved locally helps shape the country nationally. The opportunities exist, and I want to extend to you the phone number of how you can be involved. That number is 408-445-9500. When you call this number, they're going to give you a list of ways you can be involved, from small to large, but it's really up to all of us. So please, take the time, 408-445-9500. Get involved today with the Democratic Party so that all of us have a better life.
Welcome back to Democratic Television and our guest, Chris Riley. Chris, you've mentioned some interesting stuff about things people may need to think about when they run for office. What do you do when a candidate says, Chris, I need your help and I want to run for office? I assume you sit them down somewhere and get rid of all the distractions.
Yeah. Well, I talk to them in ways of why they want to run. Are there particular issues? To really take a look at it and to look at many different factors. First of all, they're going to give up a portion of their life for X amount of time. Do they have a spouse or a partner or children or whomever?
A job,
all those things to think about. That for a time period they're going to want to continue whatever job they have because they won't have another job, but just in ways of thinking about all the time that it takes. And then to also make a list once they have kind of thought about those things, in ways of making a list of everybody that they know. In ways of, who's close to them, who are the closest people to them, to who are the furthest out people from them, and in ways of thinking about, in particular in ways of raising money, where are they going to get their first 100, their first 1,000, their first $10,000. And also to think about who's their inner circle, and then from there, who's the next circle, and then from there going out. Because candidates, I think one of the things that people are always afraid of is how are they going to raise X amount of dollars, and how you raise that money is by who you know and by asking people, and by having good staff that can help you.
Now, when you're talking about running for office, I assume you're talking about even running for a school board or for city council or something that may not be considered a full-time elected position, where you definitely have to give up your day job. So
yes.
You do this if you were running for a school board race.
Most definitely. Because school board races can be quite contentious. There might only be 2 positions, but have 8 people running. And then, so there's really a lot of time and ways of thinking about who you're going to talk to, and again, in ways of staffing, trying to make sure that you bring on somebody who understands, which voters you need to talk to and all the rest of that. But as a candidate, how much time you're going to be giving up, and then what that means, and then why do you want to be, you need to have your 30-second spiel to be able to talk to folks. Why is it that you're the candidate over this other person?
Essentially, why should I give money to you, and ultimately, why should I give you my vote?
Exactly.
You better be able to explain that.
Exactly.
Do people think those things through, the ones that you've seen? Because I've seen candidates out there that I'm not sure why the hell are running.
Yeah, many candidates don't have a full, I don't think, initially at the beginning, think it all the way through. And it's not even, it comes more than just thinking it through. Again, it's really important to write that down. And in particular, I've worked with candidates before. There was one candidate that I sat down with a half an hour and kept asking him the same question, why he was running, to really get beyond that superficial piece of why he was running to really the story behind. And it's really the story that engages voters as to why they want to vote for you. Because essentially at the end of the day, people vote for a candidate because they like you and because they connect. And so I really try to let candidates know how important that piece of it is.
Now, if you're running for, say, a city council seat, the universe of voters are people that live within the city. But there's more to it than that. There's people that vote all the time, people who never vote, people who may be of a certain party. How do you learn about that kind of stuff, that whole world of demographics and turnout?
Exactly. Well, using the voter file database, and I myself, having come from Michigan, have used what's called the Voter Activation Network, which is a really good voter file database, which any Democrat, I believe now in California, can start to get a hold of. I know that it's just recently come out here to California. The voter activation, the van is run by the DNC. And so they then in turn give that out to candidates. And that is...
The Democratic National Committee will give it to candidates?
Give it to candidates or issue campaigns.
Oh.
And that is a wonderful database to be able to find out those exact things, demographics of your voters, so that you can target a very specific set of voters with your message and know if the voters are going to be voting in your election. And then also if you want to target voters who maybe don't necessarily vote in every election, but they're a demographic that you want to bring in, so you want to start talking to those voters earlier on.
And is there a value to knowing how many people you need to contact based on how many people the previous winners and losers were able to attract in terms of like your budget and your literature?
Most definitely. You take a look at all of that. You take a look at past elections, how many, and I usually go 3 or 4 cycles back, depending on which election cycle it is, and then who the candidates are, and then depending on if it's a primary or if it's a general. All of that will also play into factor. And then also in ways of setting up a budget, a whole nother, brings in a whole nother host. Depends too on what the candidate can bring in, and then looking at the literature, really trying to get them in on their messaging. And having a candidate really look at why they're running, and then to write down, I like to say 3 to 5 very specific issues of what they're running on. But when in talking to voters, really only bring it down to 3. But if you have 5 to 7, then your literature can kind of overlap in different areas.
This may sound like a silly question, but do you work to educate the candidates so they know what they're running for? And maybe running for city council, you take a look at the minutes of the previous meetings and the agendas and the packets and all that?
Most definitely, most definitely. I, however, have had candidates who have done all that research prior, so they're clearly somebody who wants to run, but ones who, may have not thought to look at the minutes or have even sat in on a city council meeting. That's really important to see how it runs, and to understand the dynamics of it too.
Have you ever had a candidate that's done everything you've said and then at the end said, I'm glad you showed me all that, now I don't want to run?
Actually, no, I've not had anybody. I've had people who don't necessarily want to do all of it, or will do pieces of it. But usually, by the time people usually get a bug that they want to run, and they really get excited and can see that they really can make an impact. I mean, everybody I think who wants to run for office believes that they can impact. Their society, whether it's local, state, national, their subsect. And so people get really excited about that they can make some real influence.
You said earlier that you've learned maybe more from the campaigns that you didn't win, from the ones you did win. What are some of the lessons? I mean, you should have worked harder. You picked a bad candidate, or a bad candidate picked you, or what are some of the lessons that you get out of doing this?
Yeah, some of the lessons learned are the main lessons that I have seen, how to better be able to work within, to have, sometimes it's the coordinated, maybe wasn't as coordinated as we thought. There'll be a coordinated campaign that might come in and, help out, from the top of the ticket, from maybe whether it's a gubernatorial all the way down to local, and that wasn't as coordinated as it could have been, or maybe not reaching out to particular parts of the different pieces of the community. And that's really what I have seen the most in ways of what's not necessarily worked, or sometimes just the numbers might have been off, or just that we weren't able to get enough volunteers along those lines, or seeing that maybe this messaging worked in this area but not in this area. And so that's really kind of learning a better area of the whole, taking a look in ways at whatever district that somebody might be running in, to get a better idea of what to do next time.
Well, that's an interesting point, and that is the context of a race. A race for city council or school board may also be sharing the ballot with presidential, gubernatorial, statewide measures, campaigns that may be better funded than yours, and all that. So you have to fight for voter recognition and to really stand out.
Exactly. And sometimes it's also seeing if your campaign can also work in conjunction with another campaign. If that might work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the voters you want to turn out are actually the voters that the other candidate doesn't want to turn out. So
you're suggesting slates where you can maybe bundle your resources a little bit.
Exactly. Sometimes that can end up working out better if you're a candidate that just is not able to raise as much money for whatever reason. Maybe you're somebody that is not as well known as another candidate. In ways of running for city council, I've had a couple of candidates be able to come together as a slate and then be able to run, which has been pretty effective.
What about working on a campaign where you think you're doing everything right as a local manager, and what's happening at a higher level isn't in sync with what you think they should be doing?
Yeah, well, I had that actually back in Michigan. My boss, a state representative, was running at the same time that the governor was running, and so the governor's numbers were actually quite low, where my candidate's numbers were actually, her polling numbers were higher, and so we did not want to carry the governor's literature at the same time. So it was kind of an interesting little thing in ways of trying to do coordination. Sometimes you cannot do that. I said, come back to me in a month when the governor's polling numbers are higher. I know they will be, but at this point, in ways of being staff for a candidate, my job is to get my candidate elected. That's always the bottom line.
We're in an interesting position now here in California, where we had a very successful presidential race. Many of the other measures went well, but the state is facing some horrible circumstances. Do you look forward to doing this kind of work in 2009 and ultimately 2010? Do you think people are going to feel more optimistic, be more open to your message?
Yeah, I do feel really pretty optimistic in those regards. I think that even though the state is facing some serious difficulties, I think with Obama getting elected, that people are very, very excited. There were people coming out of the woodwork to volunteer who had never before ever worked on a campaign. And so I think that those people got activated. I don't think they're going back. I think that they're going to stay out. And so I think that there's going to be some challenges for sure. But I think that's where people are actually going to be excited, that they feel that they can make a difference. Because now that they see that, you know, the work that maybe that they did on this election, or they saw that, you know, other people did on this election, that they can definitely have an influence.
Great. Chris, it's very likely that people are going to want to get hold of you. So do you have some contact information you can share, emails or phone numbers that you could give out now?
Most definitely, most definitely. Website is www.pm, P as in Paul, M as in Mary, ec.info. And the email address is Chris at pmec.info. And my phone number is area code 248-819-1449.
248?
Yeah, 248. It's a Michigan. It's a,
Oh,
it's a
Michigan.
Southeast Michigan area code. I kept
guess-
it. It's my cell phone.
It's your little lifeline to
Yeah.
the good old days. Well, thanks very much for being on Democratic Television. I think we're going to find that people are going to want to get more involved. And so I think information such as what you just shared is going to be helpful.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. You're welcome. Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or email us. Our website is www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.